Recording in progress.
We're all set.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Are you all set, Pat?
So, yeah.
Yes. It's 7:02 PM, and I am calling the November 7th, 2023 Hamilton Planning Board meeting to order. The meeting is being recorded. I will now take roll, so when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Pat Norton,
Present?
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, present.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, present.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, present.
Beth Herr,
Beth Herr, present.
Rick Mitchell,
Present.
Matt Hamill,
Present.
and Marnie Crouch, present. So we have a number of items on our agenda this evening, but I'm hoping that we can complete our business and conclude our meeting as close to 9 o'clock as possible. So the first item on our agenda is the stormwater management bylaw, and I can report that it passed near unanimously at the town meeting last evening. As you all may know, the Select Board and the FinCom endorsed the bylaw unanimously, as did the Planning Board. So I want to again thank Pat Norton and Alex Weshert for their efforts in getting this stormwater management bylaw in such good shape. I can report that Alex Weshert, who you only see on Zoom, is about 6'5". You would never know that unless you met him in person. It was quite remarkable. But a really great guy, and he did a lot of work on this, but our work isn't done. So Pat, you are now tasked with the regulations, and so we do have some leeway on that, because after the bylaw is approved, it's transmitted to the Attorney General for review, and so it will probably be a month or two before we get final confirmation that the bylaw will become applicable to new development in town. But perhaps you could reach out to Alex and see what type of schedule you might need, and also how extensive the changes to the regulations need to be consistent with the new bylaw. And I know you at one point said you wanted to develop applications that would really streamline the process for people who have to apply for either the administrative review or the special permit itself, which I think is a fabulous idea. I mean,
Right.
to make it user-friendly is the way to go. So does anyone have any comments with respect to the stormwater management bylaw? So, Pat, can you tell me whether or not Ken Barnes is available on Zoom? And if he is, we are awaiting a status report from him as to what developments might be happening at the seminary.
Hello, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, and we can see you as well. Welcome.
Well, it's nice to be there. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I threw my back out yesterday, so I'm convalescing. We're operating on a dual track now, and the one track is legal, and so we are consulting outside counsel because we want to do everything we can to get both the BHOD and the development agreement over the line in the time frame we've discussed. So the lawyers are very busy. I can't show you anything right now because they haven't completed their work, but suffice to say, we are going over it in detail because we really want this to be a process that we can all agree on once we've come back to you. So that is moving in a very positive direction, but you're a lawyer. You know that lawyers are very thorough and very detailed, and so that's what our lawyers are being as well, which is a good thing. And then in terms of the commercial side, we have meetings this week with several of the developers who have expressed interest. The purpose of these meetings is to get clarity. And again, there's not much to report until after we have those meetings. They will be on Friday, the holiday notwithstanding, and that will again move us further down the road. So I think it's all systems are go, but now the sort of stuff that happens that you don't see, but that's very important, is happening.
So I have one question. With respect to the legal track you mentioned, am I to understand that that would result in some type of a red line version that you would transmit to the planning board, or what actually
Yes.
are they looking at?
Yes, exactly. And it will also inform the development agreement.
Okay. So I'm not going to give you a deadline for that, but you have to understand, the sooner that you get it to the planning board, the more likely it is that we can vet it and have transparency and public input, so that this might happen at the town meeting in the spring. But the more that the process is delayed, the risk gets higher, and I can tell you the planning board has a lot of other things on its agenda. So the sooner the better on all fronts.
I appreciate that, and believe me, I've communicated that to outside counsel. So thank you for reinforcing that.
Is there any discussion, any questions for Dr. Barnes, or any members of the audience wish to be heard, or on Zoom?
Not much news.
Dave Dashkin, 215 Woodbury Street. Is there a development agreement or a draft one that's available?
No, the development agreement is between the select board and ourselves, and there isn't a draft version yet available.
I thought the select board was working on one. At least that was we were supposedly waiting for that before. Independently.
We are. It's the overlay district informs the development agreement, and so we have some very basic parameters that the town's council has provided to us. We have had some response to them on that, but the general consensus is that we need to nail down the overlay district language first, and then that will make it much easier for us to complete the development agreement.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Dascom. Conversely, though, the development agreement does inform the overlay district as well. So they,
Yes,
as
that's right.
John Whitten has said repeatedly, they do work together. And the development agreement fills in gaps in the overlay district, but the planning board's very much interested in seeing that development agreement, as I'm sure the abutters are as well.
Exactly. I mean, because otherwise, what are we waiting until something is supposedly, a lot of work has been done, a lot of people's time and the like, and, it just seems to preclude that. I mean, where are they with it now? He talks as if there's something there on paper.
So can you have a red line to us by the next meeting?
Of the overlay district, yes, that's our hope, to have
Yeah,
it by the next meeting.
Because,
And possibly a draft of the development agreement, but that might be a little too soon.
yeah, I don't expect that to happen because the bylaw may change before we get to a development agreement. Yeah, as Marnie said, you're really under the gun now, because there's going to have to be a vetting process by the planning board, and then it's a public debate that's going to go on, and it needs to be a lengthy and robust debate. So it needs to start the beginning of the year, And so we can't wait any longer if you have any hope of this getting to town meeting and having a hope of passage.
Right,
Yes, I
and
appreciate
will
that. Thank
add
you,
to-
Rick.
Excuse me, I will add to Rick's comment that if you do intend to get us the red line version by our next meeting, which is on November 21st, I would urge you to get that to us a week in advance, or at least, several business days in advance, because if we get it the day before the meeting, it's likely that many members will not have an opportunity to really review it. So, again, I think it's safe to say the ball is in your court.
Yes, and I accept that, and I appreciate that, and we will get it to you as many days in advance of the meeting as we can. That serves our purposes as well as yours.
Right. So I just urge you to do that, because in fact, if we don't get it, as I alluded to, we do have a lot of other business on our plate, and I don't want to have discussion about something that the public and the planning board are not really well informed on. Okay?
Very good, thank you. Message
you.
received, thank you.
Good luck with getting this done. We look forward to seeing it.
Thank you. Thank you, bye-bye.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the planning board response to the project eligibility letter that Chabaco Hill Capital Partners submitted to Mass Housing. And I don't know if you all had the opportunity to review it, but I did. So I prepared a draft of a response to the Pell, and Patrick transmitted that to you. And I'm wondering if you had any comments.
I had quite a few thoughts on it, but before I discuss those, I want to put the letter into context. Where is the letter going, to whom,
The-
and what is its import?
Okay, so the project eligibility letter application goes to Mass Housing, and that is a predicate to filing the application for a comprehensive permit before the ZBA. So in other words, you can't file an application for a 40B until you get approval of your
From the state,
project
from the state.
eligibility letter from the state. So what I drafted are just comments that we will transmit to the select board.
But will these go to the state?
Well, if the
Will they be appended to the,
Well, I'm hoping that the select board and the town manager will append our comments to any comments that they transmit to Mass Housing, and those comments have to be transmitted by October 20th.
but that's still up...
November 20th, I
That's still up to
apologize.
the select board.
Right.
They could choose not to transmit these comments.
Right, and so I was advised by town council that we should limit our discussion or any comments we have to the application, the Pell application, and avoid any overlap with the pending litigation, and that just makes perfect sense. So that's really the focus of my comments
So it's to the
were about the Pell.
comments should be, the two are inseparable. Comments, I mean, the Pell application is the same development that we had before, or partially the same site, same blasting, same everything else. So we shouldn't comment on the suitability of that?
Well, I mean, did you get
Right.
the draft of my
Yes.
comments? I did allude to that and advocated that our decision should be
Then let me make a couple of points. First of all, is the scenic roads involved here?
I mentioned the scenic
Are
road.
they state or local scenic?
They're local.
What?
They're local.
Both. Okay.
Local.
Local, so, oh, that's too bad. All right, well, then we'll just leave that as it is. The second thing is, it would be nice somehow to express the idea that the subsidized units in this project are going to be selling for some number like about $260,000, you said?
I think it was 265, but I
You say,
have to-
okay. And the blasting rock site preparation costs are $160,000 per unit.
Oh, you did that math?
I did that math. So if you sort of think about it, the idea of taking federal government money and subsidizing the blasting of rock as opposed to the creation of better housing units is kind of preposterous almost. I mean, I'm all in favor of subsidized housing, but I would rather see my tax credits go to build the housing
Right.
as opposed to blasting the rock. And another way of putting this is, if you moved the project or did another project in town of the same size, it would not have to spend $8 million on blasting rock. And, the subsidy would go towards providing better bricks and mortar for the low-income people as opposed to blasting rock. I mean, I know how the low-income housing tax credit works. And in fact, the way this will work is it's based on total development costs. So these guys will have a big subsidy to blast rock. Your tax dollars will go to subsidize blasting rock. And I would rather have them go towards better housing units, not blasting rock.
Right.
I don't know quite how to, I mean, I could try and write something up a little bit about this. Just sort of say, projects that didn't involve this amount of site preparation or somehow a better use of, government funds.
Right.
Something, on that order, which I think, in fact, most people would agree with that.
Right.
Well, the cost of the subsidized units are $252,000.
You know what?
$252,000.
Is the cost?
That's the price for the affordable units.
Right.
So I said 265.
That's not the cost.
So
That's
it's
the-
252. That's
well,
the selling price.
That's the selling price.
That's the
right.
selling price.
And they can sell them for that low, well, even though they will obviously cost 2 or 3 times that to build because they've got $160,000 in rock blasting just to start with. Okay, they'll cost much more than that, but the tax credit eliminates a large part of that cost. The tax credit is either 70 or 90% of total development costs. So that's the taxpayer,
Right.
subsidizing the blasting of rock to get these units down to the affordable price.
Well, see, it's unclear to me how this project is going to be financed. So I don't think that's something that we can really truly ascertain from the materials that were submitted, because
No, and I wouldn't want to actually get into those numbers. I would just be searching for some words that said, sort of like, it's a shame that, the Chapter 40B housing units, such a large amount of site preparation has to be done to provide these Chapter 40B housing.
right.
You
And
have some
so-
thoughts?
So I know that the Chabaco Hill Capital Partners submitted information from Webster Bank, and I don't know if he would be using private financing for the senior housing and some other form for the 15 units of affordable.
Yes, the tax credit.
It's an accounting issue. All you
Right.
can, if that became an issue, and I don't know if it is an issue, you can just shift the cost to the market rate units and say, that they're bearing the cost.
Right. So that's a little
But each
tricky.
of those units each of the subsidized
Well,
units
I understand the
will
academic.
receive a huge subsidy.
I understand the academic argument, but it's an accounting issue.
Why do you say that?
You can shift the cost, if the state has an objection and saying the development costs are too high, they can say, well, and you're focusing on the blasting and clearing to build the units. They can just say, well, that's not being borne, or it's only proportionally being borne by the affordable units, and the bulk is being borne.
I'm not sure that he would go ahead with this project, okay, without the federal subsidy. I understand what your argument is, that if this allows him to build the project, he can afford to lose his shirt on 15 units and then pad the price of the other units. I'm sure he doesn't want to do that. I'm sure he's totally happy with this project being, having the 15 units, highly subsidized, 70 to 90%.
Well, let me,
That allows him his cake and to eat it as well.
The only
Right.
reason he's doing this is because the planning board wouldn't approve his original. So
Right.
he's using 40B as the vehicle to drive home a project. It's simple as that. It's
well,
not.
let's,
I understand it's a vehicle for a comprehensive permit to override our thing, but the thing is, he is still using he's going to use the federal funds.
well,
You can
let
be
me
sure of
just
that.
stop, because we're speculating at this point.
Yeah.
And so we need to comment just on the four corners of this.
Right, I would say it's perfectly, legitimate to say it's a shame that the 40B program has to get involved with a project which has such high development costs, such high site preparation costs as opposed to structured development costs.
Right, and I did make the point that the $8 million in costs that were for earthworks, but there was no indication that there was any type of other extraordinary costs on this project, and so that point has been made. So I think the more important thing, in my mind, is to address the fact that the affordable units cannot be age restricted. And
Right.
in my mind, these units are, in some respects, age restricted because there is
Maybe the word should be they're totally unsuitable for children.
right, and I made that point as well, because there are no amenities for children, and if one of the adult residents has to be 55 plus, it's unlikely you're going to have very young children on the site. And so, what's interesting is when I
Wait a minute, why do they have to have one senior person in them?
well, exactly.
That's when
To
they're-
me, to
Not,
me-
40B doesn't require that. They're
No,
also-
of course not. And I think that's
Right.
improper. That's my point. It's improper because it's a way of keeping young children out of the project.
So he's saying, but he can't,
I don't
he
think,
can't
think
get
you can do that
40B
with
federal funds for this
I don't-
if he in any way imposes an occupancy sort of,
It's not,
Right.
though.
what? He's not is it he that's requiring the 55?
There is no legal limitation restricting children to those units.
yes, there's no
In the
restriction-
40B program.
Right, no, in
No,
his,
and
in his application,
His proposed,
there's no restriction on children, but by
In any of the other units.
No, just the
unit.
15 affordable ones. But listen to my point. So he has 15 affordable units, and children can live there. But because they're two-bedroom, and one adult has to be 55 plus, it's
Where does that requirement come from?
it's in his application. It's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement.
He's making it a requirement.
So
He's
but-
saying one
I
resident,
understand, but then isn't he in violation of the 40B, which says you can't have an age restriction?
obviously, he's not, because he wouldn't be filing an application that was flawed.
Right, his lawyers would have told him.
I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think that by having that requirement and limiting the units to two bedrooms, he's getting around having a lot of young children on that site. They're all going to be teenagers. I mean, most 55-year-old women
This is
don't
not
have
the
young
first time
children.
this has been done.
Of course, but we can point it out.
But then why would the state, not look upon this application very unfavorably if it has the 55-plus restriction,
And so
and the
let
rest
me
of the
just-
40B program doesn't?
Let me just make this comment.
I'm just trying to, I see a contradiction here. I'm not,
No, I get it, I
No,
get it.
no, listen to this. This is from
then we should play that up in your letter.
It's in my comments, okay?
Okay.
Listen a minute, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to get irritated in a minute. So I was looking at the guidelines for the MBTA communities, and they have a definition of housing suitable for families, which I intend to incorporate in the comments, if you agree. and it says, housing suitable for families means housing comprised of residential dwelling units that are not age-restricted housing and for which there are no zoning restrictions on the number of bedrooms, the size of bedrooms, or the number of occupants. And so I think that by having 2 bedrooms and at least stating one occupant has to be 55 years of age or older, there's a shift to get away from very young children. And in conjunction with that, there are no amenities for children, such as a playground or something. And so when they ride their bikes, they should probably wear knee pads and helmets because they're going to be going down a pretty steep roadway. But that's beside the point. Any further?
I mean, in that paragraph, you couldn't add something like, this is contrary to the spirit of Chapter 40B? All
Well,
these age restrictions in children? I'm just trying to,
yeah, right.
it just,
I can add that.
I mean, for people who work in this, it's obvious, but okay. It's not clear the select board knows it.
Right. Any other comments on that?
You're next to the last permit. I have not, I've actually asked some economist friends of mine on this, and they don't know either. How the transition of these units operates between owners.
Oh, right. For them to actually be on the subsidized housing index, they have to be deed restricted in perpetuity. The affordability component has to be part of the deed restriction in perpetuity.
I understand that the buyer, suppose the initial buyer comes in and then 5 years later has to move and he wants to sell it. So to understand that the buyer then still has to conform with probably, I'm guessing, whatever restrictions are in place at the time, not the original, okay? But then there's the question of what price does that unit change hands at, and who gets what?
Well,
He can't sell it for a market price.
no, they have to remain.
Right, so
at the-
is there an escalating price with the CPI or something like that that says after 5 years, you can sell this unit for, 1.05 to the 5th power
Well,
times
like
265?
At the Tugworth properties on Willow Street.
Right.
What's the name?
Those are owned properties.
No, they're rental.
The
but-
rental. That's
but-
why 40B prefers rental, because it avoids this whole issue of what happens when, owners transition.
Well, like at the Junction, they're owned as well. But there's a.
Are the affordable owned?
Yes.
Yes.
They're-
So,
okay.
really, what has to be done is to hire someone like Harbor Light to oversee all of this. They have to oversee the marketing, they have to oversee the lotteries for who can buy them, and they have to oversee all the transitions. And the town, to some extent, has to be involved as well to make sure all of this is kosher. So none of that is
Okay,
alluded
so
to
it's-
in here. So that's the way it's done, because it's a very detailed process in terms of
Well, it
advertising.
would affect the tax contribution if this is a restricted price in perpetuity down the road with some formula, then the tax receipts from these units will forever be well under market, as opposed to if there was some period after which the units could revert to market pricing and so on, then there might be a little light at the end of the tunnel, but I don't know.
Well, that happened on some of the units that were on the subsidized housing index. They were only deed restricted for, I believe, 20 years. And so,
30,
30?
yeah.
Well, anyhow, people
Okay.
lived there for 30 years, and then they hit the jackpot after that, and they sold it and made a big profit. And that's exactly what you don't want. If you're subsidizing housing for someone, they shouldn't profit from any increase after the deed restriction.
On the other hand, if you're the town and looking
Expires.
for tax revenue, that
Maybe
is
you
a
want it.
little bit of a break,
Well,
even
anyhow-
though it occurs 30 years into the future.
Right. So anyhow, do we want, the question is, do we want to send our comments to the select board? If so, does the draft that I have, is it adequate? I can add a little bit of language to your points, Bill. But if it is, I'd like to move on because I think under, as a practical matter, this is going to be fairly perfunctory, and the real issues will come before the ZBA. So we'll see. We'll see what transpires.
I suspect, since there's a long queue of these projects, because they're so lucrative, that the applicant, in this case, Chabaco Partners, would rather not highlight the fact that they'll be spending $160,000 per unit of federal subsidized money to blast rock. And I would just like, that to be standing out there in glaring obviousness, so that if this gets attached and sent to the state says, oh, really? That $8 million, which is, 50% of the cost, more than 50% of the cost, is all just to blast rock. Maybe we should fund another project.
Well, yeah,
I may be, vastly underestimating their sophistication to analyze this project backwards and forwards and upside down. But
Well, my understanding is that if a project eligibility letter is issued, it doesn't constitute any type of promise of funding.
No. It goes into, there's an application, there's a bidding war. What happens is it goes into the pool with all the other 40Bs, and then the applicant, in this case, I know how it works with rentals, so what he probably does is he's probably adjusts the price so that if he offers to have the houses sold for a lower price, then the state looks more favorably on the project. Okay, some of that has to do with the magnitude of the subsidy, as it's perfectly reasonable that they do that, but that's how developers in the pool compete with each other.
Right, and
They sort of offer a better deal for low-income people. Say, oh, we'll build this unit and these units and rent them for, $500 a month when the next project is $600 a month.
Bill, what do you think he does with the cost that he sheds from those affordable units?
Oh, they all get covered by the tax credit.
Or they'll be transferred over to the market rate unit?
No, they get covered by the tax credit. Come on, that's how this works. There's a huge active market in those tax credits. They're worth they sell on the secondary market for almost $1 per dollar.
Okay.
And you get the tax credit, you put it up on the secondary market, and General Motors, somebody else that wants tax credits, pays 90 cents on the dollar of the tax credit and gets the tax credit, and then their taxes are reduced.
So my point is that it's an accounting game.
Wait a minute. If General Motors, no, that's not true. If General Motors doesn't pay as many taxes because they bought these tax credits that my taxpayer money provided, okay, that's coming out of taxpayer money in order to get these units built.
We're subsidizing General Motors.
No, because General Motors paid, the developer for the right to get those tax credits, so the developer's costs went down, and in fact, that's where the subsidy lies. I just attended a seminar 2 weeks ago.
Bill, you're going to turn into butter if you keep chasing your tail.
And I really learned an awful lot about how this LAHTC works. And it's fine. It's just, if I was on the state review board, I'd say, well, rather than throwing this subsidy at something that's going to have huge costs, mostly for rock, why don't we, throw it at a different project and we can extract lower rents or a better building. That's another thing that happens in these projects. You can get very good competition between projects for architectural quality as they use up some of the subsidy. And, I would put this way down at the bottom of the queue if I knew that much of the project was being spent on blasting rock.
Well, do any other board members have anything to add to this?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. No.
I'm ranting.
Just that I'm surprised that it is Tobacco Hill Partners submitting the application, because that's not really something Larry Smith and his group does for 40B housing developments. I understood there's probably
Well, that's probably why he
private investors
wants to
behind his
sell them.
project.
Why he wants to sell them. What he's doing is he's just using this, as Rick says, to get over our, you know, our refusal, and then he'll sell the projects off, and that will, you know, cost him a certain amount of money, but it won't cost him very much money because they'll be subsidized.
Madam Chair, I suggest that rather than try to speculate on
I-
reasons why, we just decide whether it's a valid comment, and then if it's a valid comment, let's incorporate it.
That's fine.
I feel it's a valid comment, but I have nothing to add to it.
I agree.
I do
Yeah, I
too.
agree.
Could you just then send me
I'll send you a paragraph, just a little
short
paragraph.
paragraph? Because we really
Well
can't
said.
speculate about
Right, no,
what
good job.
Tobacco Hill Capital
take it.
Partners is intending here, or its motives, or anything else. We just have an application
full vim and
before
vigor.
us. So may I entertain a motion to approve?
Sorry, Marnie, just before you do, there's
Oh, sorry, I
some
apologize.
public comment.
Oh, absolutely. But the public can transmit their own comments. So these are the comments of the planning board. And so I understand from the last meeting of the select board that the select board will receive comments from the public.
Okay. Al DeGroot, regarding Bill's points, might you include in response to the state that there are other options that would be shovel-ready at the seminary? Would this have the state consider more carefully the environmental impact?
I would just urge anybody who has any comments about this project eligibility application to forward them to the select board.
That's what I was thinking.
Because what we're considering now are planning board comments, and and I'll repeat myself, the select board will receive comments from the public. So you may have ideas that we do not. So, and I think you should send them.
The other comments from Emil.
What's that?
The other comments from Emil, I think he becoming a panelist.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
I just allowed you to become a panelist.
Okay, so, does anyone have
Sorry,
any
there's one
other?
more anonymous comment. Are the board's comments to the
Board of
Board
Selectmen.
of Selectmen a public document? And if so, how can a resident obtain a copy? The board's comments, I suppose they're talking about your draft.
Yeah, right,
This
can
written
request anything.
thing, once edited,
Yeah.
getting passed to the select, is that a public document?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can FOIA
yeah.
request
You
it.
could
Post it
request
on
it
the-
from the select board.
Okay, thank you.
And I can't guarantee that the select board will entertain our comments, so,
That'd be it.
So you're in the midst of a motion,
yes, please.
so you're going to make it? I'll second if you make it. The motion
He's
was to...
talking to you.
I don't think the chair makes motions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
So somebody needs to make a motion to, what do we want to do? To
It
accept these
actually
with
should-
with
This
Bill's, with Bill's
Bill's comments.
comments, and then I think I'm okay with circulating it. I don't need to reread it. Other board members okay with that?
I'd make a motion to approve the planning board comments regarding the application filed by Tobacco Hill Partners, conditional on including Bill's paragraph and his comments he's just made.
Second.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you assent. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Weeden, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. Okay. Take care of that. Okay. So now we can turn to our discussion of options to rezone the business district, and that would include consideration of the Winthrop School. And we went back and looked at what the planning board had done way back in April. Do you all remember that? And we looked at the different options for the Winthrop School, including expanding at that time, the commercial district to include the Winthrop School. So Emil, put together some materials that I think would be very helpful. And the only caveat I have to this now is this MBTA Communities, Chapter
3A.
40A, Section 3A. And I don't know if you all had the opportunity to look at what Patrick Revert sent around about 4:30. I had asked him about what the consultants were up to with respect to complying with Section 3A, and he did transmit some information. He was leery of transmitting it because he's not happy with the product, and there's some issues with it. And when I looked over it, I had more questions than answers with respect to it. So I think we have to, I don't want to address it. I think it needs explanation as to what information was used and why there are two districts contemplated instead of one, and how this all unfolds. So I think we should go forward with Emil's slides, and then the one thing Patrick did indicate was that John Whitten will be involved in this, and so I think that what I would like to see is to be able to, marry this, whatever requirements of 3A we have to comply with a form-based code for the downtown, so that, in a sense, we comply, but we also protect the character of the town and also have an increased tax base if that's feasible. And I know that the guidelines issued by this new Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities does specifically provide for mixed-use development. And so there are some caveats with respect to that, but the Commonwealth did respond to feedback, I would assume, from cities and towns to take that into consideration. So I can just read you this one blurb from the guidelines, and it says, "The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities shall take these mixed-use development districts into consideration as reducing the unit capacity needed for a multifamily zoning district to be reasonable, where, 1, the mixed-use development zoning district is in an eligible location where existing village-style or downtown development is essential to preserve pedestrian access to amenities." And there are other requirements, but that one struck me. So I think that certainly the Winthrop School, if it were mixed use, you could argue that it preserves pedestrian access to Patton Park.
So there's really a strategic question here, is will the state accept that the town is engaged in an extensive analysis of a district to include mixed use with a higher level of density without penalizing the town? In other words, we have until
December 31st, 2024.
Right, December 31st of 2024. So we're proposing to engage in a pretty intensive, given what Emil told me, probably an 18-month, very public, transparent process to discuss what can and should go there and what it should look like. And so I
My
think-
understanding is that if you you have to take initial steps toward compliance.
Which we've
And
done.
if you're working toward compliance, you may not,
Penalized?
maybe in the short term, but maybe not in the long term. There are a number of really hard issues to resolve here.
Right, here's where I'm going with this, though. I think it would behoove us, when we know what we're doing, to then engage with our elected representatives and get to the state office that manages and the specific people that are evaluating this, and have a conversation with them and show them what we're doing to meet the intent of the bylaw, so that we're not penalized for not having finished it by the 31st of December next year.
Not just finished it, getting it approved.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You've got
yeah.
it across the finish
Well,
line.
we
Right.
can't, I mean, we can't guarantee it's gonna pass
Right,
with the town meeting, you can't.
no.
The
I
concern,
mean, we can do our job, but at the end of the day, the people are gonna vote one way or another. And I
Well-
don't know how you can be penalized when you don't have control over that.
the concern that
Oh,
I
yeah.
have is tagging the rezoning of the Winthrop School and us all looking at each other and saying it's because of trying to comply with the 3A requirements from
Right.
the MBTA, when it's really not. It's not the reason, it's not the reason we initiated the project, it's not the
No, it's not.
it's not the reason why the town wants to sell the school and develop the land. It's not a good reason to try to justify, the 3A requirements are not a good reason to look at rezoning the Winthrop School.
That's not the reason we're doing it. What we're doing is saying we're rezoning this, and it will incorporate many, if not all, the requirements of 3A. So we're meeting the spirit of the,
But I don't understand, I think you're saying the same thing I just said.
no,
It sounds very much like you're saying the thing.
it's called political expediency.
I understand, but it's not genuine. Like the
Well,
goal of.
we're listening-
We're being hypocritical by saying we should start on a form-based process to develop the downtown, with the solution being developing Winthrop School and allowing the town to financially benefit from the sale of the school, while, by providing 3A as justification
Well,
and further, reasoning behind the whole effort. I don't understand how.
Well, first of all, the town isn't selling the property and can't sell the property until it's rezoned. And there's a rezoning bylaw that's passed that enhances the value of that piece of property. And that's what we're talking about with a potential form-based code on that site. So that could be several years away. If remember, John Whitten said the whole thing is a hypocritical exercise, because in fact, all you can pass the bylaw knowing full well that the land is not developable and won't support the unit counts that the state would like to achieve. He said that point blank.
Right.
So the whole exercise is a hypocrisy. What I'm trying to say is, we'd like to have our cake and eat it too, is that we're going to likely rezone and do a form-based code on the Winthrop site when the schools decide that they're ready to vacate that site. We'll be doing it in advance of that, and we're going to discuss that a little later, and use that as a cover to say we are working towards a bylaw that will essentially achieve the intent of 3A by expanding the commercial zone where they can already do what 3A wants. They want a larger zone, half a mile circumference from the train station, so the town doesn't get penalized on the 31st or after the 31st of next year in pursuing any kind of grants that the state might be offering, because that's the stick. They've got the stick and they're saying you must do this, and we're saying, well, we have a zone that already allows it, and we're working on expanding that zone.
There's many options on how to respond
Right,
to the
but I
requirement.
just-
That's one of them.
Right, I mean,
I wanna
one
make
option
one
for responding is
correction,
just
is
to
that the commercial-
upzone
the commercial
R1A a
district-
little bit.
We've got multiple conversations
Excuse me,
going on.
but the commercial district right now doesn't comply with 3A because it's all
It
special
does, I
permit.
thought we, I
No,
thought we.
it's all special
okay.
permit.
No, it's not.
I thought you had said last time.
Now, hold on. One conversation at a time. I have limited capabilities.
Right, well,
It's by right. You remember when we approved Willow Flats? That was a by right. It's not special permit.
So I thought,
I
you know,
don't know, are you sure? I mean,
Yeah, you guys were here.
I thought at the conclusion of our conversation last time, we had said we already have a zone of reasonable size.
Well, we have a zone, but
Based on-
it's not reasonable according to the requirements of 3A.
Of the HDCD, not of the law. The law basically said it has to be a zone of reasonable size. The law said that. The interpretation, and John Witten said that, was, he said that guidelines are not regulations.
Right, that's true.
And he said that that wasn't, and that legislators clearly know the words they're using and why they're using them. So they use the word guidelines. So to comply with the law,
Okay.
we would needed a
Right.
zone of reasonable size.
Right.
So-
Well, then you could say, well, we've already got one and it's a reasonable
Right.
size. But that's a legal argument that, you could just say, we're not doing it because we've already got it. We're complying with the intent of the legislature. Your regulations are not, or your rules are not regulations. Therefore, we're done. Go away and leave us alone and don't penalize us.
Or we
But
wait
I
and
mean, I
see
think
how
that
it
goes-
kind of plays out a little bit more, since it doesn't have to be done for few.
That's fine.
Right.
I mean, we can.
I think that goes back to Patrick's separation issue, which is that we can probably make enough progress by adjusting the zoning a little bit in the areas that we already have, so that, transit requirement, looks like we're making progress and so on. And that's really a separate question than what do we want to do with the Winthrop School?
It is.
I mean,
I think we should just separate them and.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I think, if I may add, I think once you dive into the opportunities of the whole downtown area, with the Winthrop School being part of that, I think that you may find that a lot of the interests that the town establishes as what's good for the town will dovetail with the MBTA goals. Not all of them, and certainly not the scale. Right? But a lot of the underlying principles dovetail. So then it's just a matter of looking at it, are we worried the tail is wagging the dog, or is the dog wagging the tail? So if we approach this as a kind of a holistic exercise and look at what's good for the town, and aim at that, run at that as hard as we can, to your point, we can then go to the authorities and say, look at how hard we've run at this, right? And it dovetails with what you're asking, and here's what we've achieved. But the impetus behind it is not to slavishly comply with something that you can't comply with, but the impetus is, again, the dog wagging the tail, what's good for the town. But it needs to be looked at holistically.
Right, so why don't we deal with just the.
What's good for the town?
Well,
Let's do it. Yes, let's do it.
So let me start off with a couple of observations. The rents in the existing downtown are nowhere near, not even within 1,000 light years, close to covering new development costs. They are simply rock bottom rents. And so the notion that there's a commercial demand for commercial space in Hamilton that will support development is just, I don't think is true. There's nobody anywhere in Stanley Lapin's shopping center, none of the Railroad Avenue stores, all those rents are nowhere near to covering, development costs for commercial.
Well, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure
So I'm
that's the
saying,
assumption here.
that there's no market for commercial,
Where is this coming?
and so why do we want to plan for it?
We're not planning for commercial, we're planning for the potential of mixed use.
Right, mixed use, all right, I'll restrict myself to the commercial part of mixed use, all right? And in fact, if you listen to the select board, they really think that there's a gold mine here, that we're going to sell this off for $5 or $10 million, and it'll help out the town because there's a commercial demand.
Well,
I think that's
That would be
like
the-
pie in the sky dreaming.
that'll be determined by the outcome of the exercise that we're going to hopefully discuss, we don't know what form it's going to take. It would be great if it incorporated mixed use. It doesn't have to be some big commercial use. I mean, you know, Willow Flats had 2,400 square feet, and it's now taken up by a bakery. So it doesn't have to be something that you're thinking of already. And if you're building what's going to amount to a small little,
But that's an existing building. If it is, the rents in those, I've looked, the rents in those places are nowhere near enough to cover any development costs.
I have an idea.
We're arguing about the wrong thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
forget that.
I have a really good idea. Let's let Emil,
Well,
you know, make his presentation, because what Emil is going to show us is really good planning, and then what actually happens may hopefully achieve those
But
those
what's,
goals.
I guess, before we endeavor on the presentation, what is the goal at the
Yeah,
end of your presentation? What
That's
would you
good.
like to receive?
I was going to start
for-
there, because that's a good
Yeah,
starting
yeah.
point. We have an RFP coming up if we're going to do
Yeah,
this form-based code in the downtown area. That means we have to move on that pretty quickly. And one of the first things you need to do is decide what is the area. And right now, there is no program. There is no commercial, there is no residential in the plan, because
there is no plan.
there is no plan. And that's the thing, we're waiting for the consultants to work with the town elected officials and of course the residents, to come up with ideas about what, and it could be that you're exactly right, there is no room for commercial. But this is also a 50-year, looking ahead 50 years, and whatever the code is, it will not be developed for decades. It will not be built out. It'll be built out over a period of time. And in which case, everything that's everything that's in place now would continue.
Oh, well, you're thinking of
With
the
no change.
entire downtown.
Yeah.
As opposed to the-
I think it's important for us to, if we're writing an RFP, to let the proposers know what the scope of the work is in this project. And we can word it in a way saying that what we would like to do is consider the entire town in this. However, that's pending their review of the town when they arrive here. Then that actual area can be established. But I think we ought to assume it's going to be the whole downtown, and we'd like to give you some reasons why that's important to do it that way tonight. So I think, so what do we want to achieve? I'd like to get a consensus on the board that what is the area of downtown? What are the delineations of the downtown area to be used in the RFP? And what I also submitted was, to everybody on the board, was a scope of services, which I think you're going to use, hopefully, when you talk with the select board.
So I think maybe we need to back up a little bit, is the scope is, the budget's going to drive the scope.
Yeah.
So we haven't got a budget yet, and what Emil's referring to is the, myself and Scott Mattern of the HDC have been talking to the town manager and to the select board about the need to do planning in advance of the disposition of the
Yeah.
Winthrop School. They're on board with that. Conceptually, they're on board with that. We've thrown a number at them of $150,000. And on the 20th Selectmen's meeting, we're going to be making a presentation, Scott and I, or in addition to a number of other things, we're going to be talking about what HDC is doing, but saying we need to be planning. So I think the groundwork is laid for a positive result of that request, and I think it's important for a couple of representatives from the planning board to be at that meeting to echo.
To your point, if members of the planning board attend that meeting, it may be, we should have a joint meeting. It might be helpful to have a joint meeting.
I'd prefer not to do that, because now it's clogging up. We've set this meeting up for us, and by us, I mean the Hamilton Development Corporation. I think this is an opportunity, hopefully the board is already on board, and this is just presenting the information, why they should be doing it. I had asked Emil a couple weeks ago, you know, if they ask for a scope of services or concept about, well, we should be expanding this to the entire downtown if the budget will allow it, to, you know, so we have a uniform code zoning for the downtown that conforms to whatever the outcome of this is. I don't want to turn it into a big thing, a big show. All I think the select board needs to hear is the rationale, which I think they already buy into, because they're, as Bill has said, they're salivating over the potential sale of that property and the revenue that it generates, tax revenue that it generates. So I think conceptually they're there. I'd just rather just have them say, yes, this is something we're going to support, before we get into, like, a lot of details on this. Concept is, we'd like to expand this, and the planning board could say that, you know, like to expand this to the downtown and incorporate all of the downtown, so we have a model of uniformity in the downtown, and just let it have that. Let it be that.
Okay, let's hear from Emil then, because I think that what he is proposing would.
Is this you?
Yeah, can we share the screen?
Is this you sharing?
Yeah.
I think this is your screen we're looking at.
Who's in control?
Do share.
We're looking at your screen.
Yeah, but,
Click
Yeah,
on what you
you're on the
wanna
screen.
Bring up.
You might be sharing a window that you don't want to share.
Oh,
let's see. Okay, this is the picture I'm trying to, it's not up there on the,
oh, can you go down to
Stop sharing.
share screen on the bottom?
it's paused.
Does-
If you just stop.
Resume share.
Oh, there we
There
go.
we
There you go.
All right,
Got
I
it?
got
All
it.
right.
Thanks.
See, it was scared just when you got up and moved towards it.
Yeah. It's powerful.
Ta-da.
We're going to start with, we got three things we really want to accomplish today, hopefully. We want to review and talk about the options to doing the form-based code in the downtown area. That's number one. What are the areas? We're going to talk about why it's important to do particular areas and why it isn't. The other thing we're going to try to do is get a better understanding, and this would be important for the select board. What is it that the consultants are going to do? What are they going to bring to the table that will really benefit the town? Because this type of coding is not like conventional coding. It's not one size fits all, that within the entire downtown district, you're going to say all buildings must be no higher than 35 feet. All buildings must be set back X feet. It is not like that. This is where we're going to have districts within the town that are assigned specific planned components to them. And for example, where would the residential be? Where would the commercial be? Where would the mixed use be? Are there any exclusive commercial or exclusive residential? This is the way you would plan the downtown, so it's not everything is in one code. The districts are very important, and why this is different from other types of codes. The Google map of what the downtown looks like, this is all familiar, but this is going to be kind of our reference point. North is to the top of the sheet, of course. The diagonal road down the center there is Route 1A. Let's see.
Yep, no, we know where it is.
You know where it is, okay, Walnut here. So, so right now, what we'd like to do is look at 4 areas that are in the downtown area. The current business zone, which is right here, that's roughly, and I took these numbers off, it was 21.95 acres. I've heard 24 before, but this does not include the major roads. There's a residential area here that's on Carriage Lane. There's town property, which is the safety building, public safety building here, Council on Aging here, and of course the Winthrop School here. And then there's Patton Park, right at the top. Across Willow Street, it's R1A, 20,000 square feet zone. This is R1A over this side of town, 1A here, and above Patton Park, Myopia, it's R1B zone. So that's the area that's at play that we're looking at. Patrick put together in April 2021, he put together this discussion slides, which I just grabbed this one. This was the commercial district, so this is the area that he,
The existing commercial district.
that's the existing business district, yeah, in town.
Is the pink or the purple?
Sorry?
The pink purple is the,
Yeah,
existing?
yeah, the purple is the bluish purple color is the business district. And it starts at Willow Street on the east side,
West of
and it
Linden.
extends behind Hamilton Crossing here,
Yeah.
and behind, and right along this former railroad easement right here. This is the Winthrop School corner, and the Winthrop School right there. So he created this. This is the, what he was considering to be what's at play. These are the areas in the shaded yellow area. And then he created this, identifying ownership and size, really, of each of the areas. This is all zoned R1A, but this is the Winthrop School, and the other town facilities here. Looks like a town property at the community building right across the street. This is the residential section down here. There was a map about resources, which I won't go into here, and some on utilities. This one I was not able to figure out. There's some gas line there, and but I think in some stormwater it looked like. But at this stage, that doesn't really matter in what we want to discuss. He then created these three plans that are option A, B, and C, as you see on the right-hand side here. And the differences are, what is the disposition of this residential zone right here in the top photograph? He did an area takeoff on each of the parcels, beginning at 325 Bay Road, which is Winthrop School. That's 14.8 acres, and so forth. So this one, the idea under contiguous was that rezoning to business district zone would include everything right through the residential. It would remain residential until such time as decided, that maybe there's going to be investment in the properties here, and they would go to follow the zoning regulations. The second option was to just grab the two lots right on that front on Bay Road right here, either side of Carriage Lane, and then keep the 4 residential units in the back. This is a cul-de-sac. That's a dead end right there. So option B is frontage lots only. Option C, just leave it as is. All of it remains residential. In other words, it would interrupt, on this side of Bay Road, interrupt the business zone. So those are the 3 options, and that's what one of the decisions that Patrick Reffert was looking for with the planning board. I'd like to make the case that the town center should take on this configuration, satellite shot, but it should include, I think, Patton Park, and I'll try to give you some reasons why that would be the case. So the town center zone then would take on all of that area. And again, using a form-based zone, it would then be decided what are all the characteristics that we're trying to achieve in town center, and then write a code for each of the districts. Again, for example, they could be mixed-use, commercial, residential, or other. There'd be civic spaces. This would remain a civic space, but it should be part of the town center consideration. The MBTA is a half-mile radius. So I did a circle here of 2,640 feet from the depot right down here at the Hamilton line with Wenham. And you can see a half mile goes up just beyond Patton Park here. It goes all the way over to here, so it's by the library a little bit, and then down in this area. So it's quite an extensive area. The zone then that we're still talking about is right in the center zone right here. This would be the center zone. So what I'd like to do is just talk for a minute about, we're going to do some kind of informal work here, just looking at, but what I'd like to do is just show you, and just switch the,
Oh, that's going to be some interesting housing.
that's going to be on,
I'll
That's
tell
gonna be
you,
on the
it's
corner of
hard to
That's
get
gonna-
there.
Asbury and
yeah.
It's hard to get there. Emil and I
I
are
like
the
that.
only people who have been there.
I'm going to show that, and I thought, Rick, you might, this is part of a 54-slide presentation the state put on, and I thought you might be interested in that, getting information from this, and I'll send you the PowerPoint. This is from them. I just culled it down to roughly 20 slides. I'm going to go through it really quickly, but this is to get a better understanding or in your mind about what a form-based code is and why you should consider it when you implement it, why you should consider certain things like cohesiveness in the entire area that you want, to develop that continuity, to allow you flat flexibility in designing it the way you would like. And again, I'm going to go through this quickly. I did highlight some words in red here, some keywords, but this is all from the state. Form-based codes, effective land use tool for shape, pedestrian scale, mixed use, and enlivened town environments. Village-style development, that's where you want to use it. Arrangement of form and buildings is how you do it. And it's a response to undesirable urban sprawl. The concepts are starts with a shared vision with town officials and the public, and it goes to a plan. It's designated form, more than use or density, and building shape public spaces using the planned district model. So that's a key. So what is required is that proposers are asked to put together a team of multidisciplinary individuals who can bring a different aspect to the table when they come to Hamilton to talk to the people and give them go through, again, this visioning process to create what it is that the people want. This is a proactive process, again, similar to what we did with Gordon Conwell. The multidisciplinary people would be, of course, land planners, architects, landscape architects, engineers, economic development experts, and so on. There'd be others, too, who come in and out of the process, depending on how they want to run it. But the key is that all of these specialties are engaged and involved at one time in the course of this project. And what they will do is they develop a scenario for the entire area that's been designated to be town center to create what the vision of the people have for this community. Now, one of the misconceptions is that it's going to turn into an urban center. That is not true. If you want to build a really rural place, use a form-based code. If you want a really urban place, use a form-based code. In other words, what comes out of this is what goes in. And if the takeaway from the people, from the planning board and many others is to do as little as possible, then that's the way the plan will be drawn up. So this is not going through the developer to come up with what's good for the developer to do on the 14 acres, for example. Give him sort of a range of option uses in a conventional code, let him come up with whatever use he thinks is best. This is for the town to say, we have 14 acres. How do we want to utilize that that's going to support and build on and enliven our entire downtown? And the key to doing the big picture is that things like streets, back streets, and other, for access, they don't stop at property lines, they go through it, because everything is at play in the form-based code. Everything has to comply with the code eventually, if once the reinvestment takes place in all the properties. But it's not retroactive. Whoever is there now will continue to be in business with no changes required, if and until they decided maybe reinvest 50% or more of the assessment value of the building. Then it would be obliged to comply with the code. So why does the form-based code make sense? They're prescriptive. What's what you want rather than what you don't want. That is a critical thing. Encourages public participation. It enables incremental growth You don't have to develop the whole thing at once. You can do it over time, but you know what the plan is. You know what you're not going to redo something or realize later on if you had only done it a different way. So maybe you lose some potential that could have been anticipated in one sitting when looking at the entire town. So it really is beneficial in a lot of ways. And it works well in established communities. It codifies the community's existing DNA. They're easier to understand because they're graphic. Once you get used to them, they're really a great way. They're almost exact. It's all as of right, too. It streamlines the permitting process because it is as of right. So developers like it. They like the predictability of it. They know the town is not going to change it once they're got their, and they can avoid the special permitting on it. The trick is that when you agree to it as a community, it is as of right, and so you have to be sure that is what you want as a community. So that's a critical part of that whole thing that should not be, that should be stated. And form-based codes are enforceable based on regulatory compliance with stated design standards for the public realm. So these are the key components for the FBC, the form-based code. And this is what we have to include for a proposer, a responder to our RFP. They have to create a regulating plan, which we were sort of, this group has been over that with the Gordon Conwell site a little bit, but the regulating plan is how you organize your whole site, by streets, by building types, by neighborhoods. Those are all the different ways you can organize it. It has to be a definitions, glossary section. That's pretty much typical, all zoning codes. Public space and street standards. This is something missing in all public, this form-based code will address how buildings approach the public space being, and the public space, of course, is sidewalks, streets, parks. What the form-based code can do is, how do those two interface? The private building and the public space. That's key. Building form standards are what would capture then sort of the reference to DNA. If, for example, everything needed to be a residential scale, looking at a lot of 1A, they were formerly residential buildings along that. If that becomes kind of the character of the area, that can be a standard that could be continued in appropriate places. And then the optional is the architectural standards, which I know the town has some architecture design review, but they can maybe be emboldened a little bit here. Then this is just a description of the regulating plan, which I won't go into, the glossary, public street space standards, design specs for street trees, where and when you're going to have them, curbs and lampposts and so forth. Traffic calming measures. Route 1A has got some really critical intersections that I think need to be kind of addressed. For example, Walnut and Asbury. Those two are kind of really problematic. So this would be something that would be created in that the code would create that. Sidewalks, lighting standards, street trees, transit, train stations and so forth, bike facilities. The building form standards, again, controls placement, orientation, features, and functions of buildings. So it includes building typology, which means a type of building, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, front yard setbacks, build-to lines, and so forth. Parking, this is perhaps the third most critical thing, is what happens to parking? Can you screen it? Can you hide it? Can you put it in a place that is central to your development, convenient for people, so you park once and go anywhere? You can go north or go south from the parking lot, within a couple of minutes. Now, the ideal thing about this town size is that it's 1/2 mile from the Wenham line to the top of the park, Patton Park. 1/2 mile is an ideal walking distance. So if you park midway in some central parking areas, it'd be relatively easy to park once and go to multiple places on foot. So it really has a lot of good use. Land use, planned district zones. This is what I mentioned before. you can actually plan, where do you want your commercial, and do you want it exclusive or mixed use? Mixed use being usually residential on the upper level. In architectural standards, again, this gets into more things like creating courtyard areas and so forth, which would be, again, pretty neat. Two ways to do it. One is an overlay district, so it could be an overlay on the entire town. So you adopt a planned district-based overlay district with building form, streetscape, and architectural standards. Or a comprehensive code update, which I think is what we're thinking of. In other words, replace the downtown current zoning in the area described or delineated to a form-based code. It's ideal for town-making redevelopment. And again, what it does is just kind of ensure. Now here, for example, is a case on the left-hand sketch here. You have you have a parking right on the road, and there's many times you should really kind of locate, especially in a downtown area, locate a building up close to the road with a sidewalk separating it. Get that proximity and get that parking behind the houses or on the side of them at least. But don't make parking the dominant feature in the downtown area. It's a distraction. It's really bad use of space, and you still need the parking, of course, and it has to be accessible. People have to know where it is. So the wayfinding will become more important there. So last slide here is how do we implement this? What happens is that we do the RFP, the town decides on who they would like to work with, and the one thing I would say, that one of the other decisions I think this board should make is, there are two ways to get a designer here. One is with an RFP, request for proposal, and we're going to put in a list of qualifications for them, and they would, in their submittal, they're going to submit a lot of their own information. What is their basic approach going to be? What other projects have they done that are similar to this, and so forth? By going through the RFP process, we're able to make a selection that's not strictly based on low bid on the project, because it's not like we're buying equipment or product where low bid might be the usual case. So because this is a special service, because they're consultants, the town would have the option to not necessarily choose the low bidder in this case, but the one with the best qualifications for a town this size and location. But, so what would they do when they came here, and what we need to stipulate in the scope of services? They do an analysis of the existing conditions and an inventory of the existing conditions. Everything gets documented. There's a public visioning, a charrette-like process, or a group of workshops. There's a regulating plan that they first come up with, which establishes what's the street layout in the zone that's, and where the primary use is going to be located. 4, develop town standards, streets, blocks, building placement, height, land use, and so forth. So this is all worked out, again, in a way that sort of maximizes across the entire town what the configuration should be and where the uses are placed correctly in this, so that it all functions as a complete town. 5, develop architectural standards or building or frontage typologies. Just get into this later, and then everything is illustrated, which is part of the great things in this, that the code itself is half graphic and half written in text. So it really is easier to interpret, and very easy to follow. So that's really what they would be asked to be doing in this. And to give a price to do it. And I would think that what might happen in this situation, if a particular proposer is selected by the town, I think there would be room for negotiation with them to talk about, obviously the budget is part of this final selection, that, but I think a number that I've heard is really reasonable and in the right range. But if for some reason it isn't, there's room there for negotiation to talk about what, if anything, or what could be done to reduce the project.
That's a helpful presentation. I think it's a great place to start for scope versus going to the town asking for a budget to do something. So scope is a good place to start. Even better place to start is to align on goals, and goals not of the select board or this board or the town manager, but of the town. And I think it's important to, I don't know if anyone's read the master plan, so about the same budget we're discussing now for the entire town, the boundary around the entire town in this effort, is what it took to develop a master plan for Patton Park. And a process that started in October of 2022 and ended in March of 23. There's 107 pages there. It's probably a bunch of projects that will never get done because it didn't start, I don't think, with a list of goals that were aligned of the town, maybe. And I don't want to shoot holes in I wasn't part of the process, and I just look at the outcome and I know what we spent on it. We spent $80,000 with consultants on the development of of the Gordon Conwell Seminary.
90.
90, close. So we're getting close to the 2 million I discussed when you include the cost of the study that was done for the town hall and everything else. But I guess my point is, that was where I was going last time, was like, how do you invest the town's money without the town backing the effort and knowing that you're aligned in the goal? I think that was what I was hoping to, before we develop a scope, before we ask for proposals, before we get a budget, what's the goal of the effort, and is the town behind it?
Yeah, I think here the impetus, of course, was the availability of the Winthrop School site as being sort of to precipitate development in the downtown area. I think that was critical.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah, I'll just
Okay,
finish.
sorry.
I was just making a comment.
Yeah,
I didn't-
yeah. So I know what you're saying, and, I have private opinions about the various studies that have been done in town. This is one I think is really critical for the town of Hamilton at this stage of all of them. But, I certainly supported the necessary changes that had to have happened here in the town hall. We can't just let the buildings fall apart, so.
Yeah.
And I think, anyway, so I don't know if I answered your question, but, Bill?
Everything I see when you point to examples of form-based code look terrific. The building placement, scale, height, infrastructure, architecture, the areas in which form-based code is, operational, look terrific. But my question to you is, when you focus that much on what something looks like, height, scale, I use the word look like very generally, are you complementing or substituting for traditional zoning which focuses on use? So does form-based code really care what goes on inside the buildings, as long as they, match up? That would, if you didn't really care what went on in the buildings, then that would say you view form-based code as a substitute for use-based code. And then I would have some serious questions, because areas need not only look good, they have to function well.
Yeah.
And functioning has to do with traffic, pedestrians, what time of day people are there. It has, and it has everything to do with use. It's not just how it looks. It has everything to do with use. So my question is, do you envisage a form-based plan for some area which says, we really don't care what goes on inside? Or do you view this as, you know, oh, yes, we do care. We want residential here and more commercial here and maybe some mixed here and whatever, you know, 2 stories, offices over here and so on. But we still want it to look like the form-based code. So is this, you see what I'm going? Is this a complement, another form of zoning that goes on top of use? Or is this a substitute in which we say, we really don't care about use, we really are much more focused on how it looks?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that conventional coding, use was up here, form was down here, this being 0. What form-based does is saying,
I would, this is, since I'm writing this up in some chapter in my book now, in some sense, this is by design. So zoning originally was designed to focus on use, and in this country, the zoning code doesn't even allow any architectural controls. Those are usually relegated to historic districts or landmarks.
exactly, but that's changed
But,
in the
but
course.
I understand it, but, I mean, that's.
The history of zoning, because zoning in this country was started back in the 1920s.
Yeah,
And what
Euclid,
happened, Euclid,
yeah.
Ohio.
No, I know.
But
I
what
know.
happened there was, it was a whole different time. They were trying to separate uses. They were trying to separate, get the residential away from the factories, get the business away from the residential.
Right, because and back in that day and age, a lot of the uses they were trying to separate did in fact have some environmental issues.
Exactly right.
Right.
But
Now that's less true.
the codes have not acknowledged the change.
Okay, but so let me go back to my original question. Is this, if we had a form-based code, does it go on top of use as a complement? Or does it go in place of use and we say we really don't care what goes on in these buildings or you know? So which of those two is it?
What it does is rebalance. So if use is up here, really important, form unimportant in conventional code.
I think we can answer this more easily,
It
quickly.
rebalances.
Yeah, I mean, just,
Yeah, I think we can do
Yes or no?
a binary
One or two.
answer to this. It does not replace it.
There's always a
It
role for
complements it.
use. There's
It
always a
complements it.
role.
In other words, just think about what we did on Gordon Conwell. What was the first thing we did? Uses. Uses here, not uses there. It complements it. That's the simple answer.
I mean,
Right.
I have,
Just think back about the
I've
Gordon Conwell process.
always been in favor.
Bill, before you keep going, so basically it codifies allowed uses within certain zones.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
And forbids them
Simple
in
answer.
others.
Yeah.
simple answer.
Right.
Okay, fine, then that is,
That's the answer.
that is a complement.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's an extension of zoning powers into a much more comprehensive design kind of approach, typical more of European towns, where town architects have a great deal of say over what buildings look like and how everything is set up. And, you know, when you walk down some beautiful little street in Prague or wherever it is, and it didn't get that way on accidentally. It wasn't spontaneous market forces that created all that beauty. It's European historic standards which allowed, you know, the king and then the government and then everybody else to control very, very detailedly how things look.
There are a lot of historic references that are picked up on in Europe.
Right, and but in the U.S.
But the
we
vocabulary-
didn't really have that, and it's just I would sort of be a little more skeptical than you about how quickly it's evolving now, because it involves fundamental constitutional issues.
I'd just like to add that, as Emil mentioned multiple times, the design piece of it, which is architectural standards, is optional. And yes, that steps into what you were just talking about as an example in Europe, but that's optional. The rest of it isn't what the building looks like or the design of the building.
Well,
It's more the position.
Yeah,
that the
position, mass, height.
The position of buildings in relationship to each other. And what I always think is very useful to think about is a lot of times with zoning, it tells you how far away from something you need to be, and it tells you the uses that can be there or not there. But what it does is it creates lots of accidental leftover space between buildings, which can be useful or can be actually hostile at the other end of the
Yeah, and
spectrum.
it creates, high buildings and low buildings and low buildings and high buildings, and they should be
And what
more
form-based
harmonious.
code,
I understand
what
that.
form-based code does is it pays attention to the leftover spaces between buildings and makes sure they're thoughtful. So that has nothing to do with building design. That has to do with
Site design.
Yes, site design, managing the leftover space.
If I can use one of the words that's going to come up in one of Emil's slides, it's the relationship of the buildings. And why do you pick the example of Prague or other European cities is that they're very walkable and their amenities integrated into the towns.
Cohesive whole.
It's
Yeah,
cohesive.
which has nothing to do with
That's
style.
all
Nothing
part-
to do with style.
Yes and no. It's all part of the plan, and it is part of planning in Europe. But we have a much more narrow definition of planning in the United States. We don't have that
Well, the
authority, and most states have historic districts because attempts at architectural controls were thrown out upon appeal.
Yeah, I know that the rights
So-
issue is really strong.
I understand that.
But
Okay.
for good reason, it should be protected. But this is not a taking. What's different here is, it was a recognition that with all the zoning codes we've had, we continue as communities to build things we don't really like. We go visit places like in Europe. Why? Because we like them.
We like them.
We like them. Why
In
don't we
fact,
build them?
they exist because they allowed planning to sort of trump, individual rights. I'm actually in favor of it. That's for a long set of other reasons. But
The
it's a little rougher road here.
Yeah. Well, the form-based codes actually came out of the architects community, not land planners, because they were not able to, architects are in the trenches. They're designing buildings. They go to a town, they look at the site, they go to the zoning regulations, and they say, okay, what are they requiring here? And what are the limitations that we have? And in many cases, your zoning regulations mandated the wrong thing. It didn't give you the right solution to come up with a better design, for the site. And it was a sense of frustration. So I'm not surprised that sort of architects kind of led that movement into planning. And one of the criticisms was it's become just, the architects like it because they do fancy buildings and they just like to do fancy buildings, and but it's not that at all. It's because the vocabulary of architecture can be anything you want it to be. But what's really critical is the mass of the building, the roof shape, the location on the site, the relationship of where the parking is to the building. Those are the critical things that can take on any number of types of vocabulary.
But I would,
And all kind of work together.
How much of that can we? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you, Bill. I was going to bring it to we're talking about how to achieve goals that the town hasn't aligned on yet. So there's a lot of ways to get at it, and form-based is a great approach, I think. And there's options on how to adopt those philosophies in different ways. Use being a huge element of it, as Bill and Jonathan had stated. But we're starting to talk about how to achieve something that we haven't all aligned on the goal for what it's meant to
Let me try. I know you
provide at the end of the day.
I do want to say
The town
something.
hasn't
Go
aligned
ahead.
on that yet.
Go
And I
ahead.
think until that point in time,
I know,
it's
but let me just
irresponsible
ask you a
to-
question. Would you rather see 14 acres in the Winthrop School site be sectioned off? It's said, okay, Mr. Developer, whoever wants to submit a proposal, you can do residential, you can do business, you can do whatever, mixed use in there. And then you go to the parcel right next door to the public safety building, or go to the residential unit down on Carriage. So one parcel at a time, you go down, you get a different developer, you get a different sensibility in terms of what should be
You're
built.
asking the wrong question.
No, it's,
You're asking a question about a property in adjacent properties and how you would approach and what restrictions you would put on it instead of like what would
But
you like
planning
to
is
see the-
supposed to take care of that. Good planning. Now, let me ask you something else, which is that,
there's no way a conventional code can match the. good
where
plan.
does site plan review fit in? In theory, site plan review, I believe, is not, you cannot force somebody, you can only advise somebody. You turn down, can you make a guy jump through hoops and, tear down his first plan and say, no, you have to build it this way, it has to look like this, it has to tie into everything and blah, 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 blah. Can you do that with site plan review? Or is site plan review advisory? I'm just trying to put this into context a little bit.
It's
Is this a stronger site plan review?
No.
No, this would be as of right.
it's not.
It isn't, it really nails it down. And
What?
that's- It nails down what that, what the limitations
A
are.
handy thing to do here is just to remember what the discussions have been at Gordon Conwell. When you have like, for example, an illustrative plan, you don't have to wrestle with where do the buildings go. You follow the illustrative plan, that's by right. Then you just have a little bit of, regulatory process on top of that to take care of stormwater and parking and traffic safety, but you've got the buildings in the right place because you follow the illustrative plan. The same thing would happen with a form-based code downtown. So it makes things easier, not harder, for the developer, but it manages the relationships on each lot, and it manages the relationships
The
in a larger
whole is more than
area.
the sum of the parts.
So here's what I'd like to say. I'd like to offer up a process where instead of debating whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, to do basically a little bit of a process, just like the town would go through, to kind of mirror what we did on Gordon Conwell, which we got up and stood at a table, and we looked at a map, and we stated our concerns, our preferences, our goals, our worries, our hopes, and we scribbled them on a map. And out of that grew a plan. Would you like to do that?
No.
Okay.
What would you like to do? Just let them run loose? Here's your 14 acres,
No,
which you will?
I'd like to do what we originally started the conversation about, is engage a consultancy to guide the public process that Emil outlined in his presentation to determine what is it that the community at large wants in terms of uses and form on Winthrop and associated properties.
I agree that that is a step. A step that could happen before that is to inform the RFP. We could go through a very brief process of looking at what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks of looking at this
Well,
a
first of
parcel.
all,
Let me finish. A parcel at a time, or look at let's just take two adjacent parcels and look at them together. We could just do that as an exercise if you want to just limit it.
that's fine. I'm
And we
looking
could
at the
put a
big-
time limit. We could do
I'm-
15 minutes.
I'm looking at the bigger picture here.
I'm with the bigger picture, but we got to get out of the
Hold
gate
on,
here.
Hold on. The reason we're having this conversation is we've positioned the decision makers to be favorably inclined to look at a form-based code process, right? Okay, so the question is, how do we make that become reality? We do that by going before the select board and describing what it is that we want to accomplish and how the money will be spent to achieve a form-based code for the Winthrop and associated properties. We get their buy-in and hopefully support to take that and either do it internally with free cash, or if they have to appropriate the money and get an approval at town meeting. If we don't if that doesn't happen, then this is all a lot of talk that's getting us nowhere.
I'd just like to zero in on the one sentence that you said. You said Winthrop School and associated properties.
Right.
So what is that? That's what I'd like the planning board
It's
to
just
agree on.
It's what Emil, guys, let's stop going down the rat holes and look at the big picture. it's the plan that Emil outlined. Now, do I know whether the selectmen are gonna buy that, or the budget's gonna buy that? I can't answer that. Conceptually, they might say, that's fine. But I wanna get the proposal in front of the people that can appropriate the money to make this process happen. I want to describe in as little detail as possible what it entails in time, money, and resources, and what's the outcome, so that they can feel comfortable that by approving that, they're making a good, sound decision. Then we can describe, then if that happens, then we can decide how this happens. You know, is the planning board going to go through a visioning session internally on its own, or whatever? That's fine. Those are details that come after getting the resources to make this happen. Because if we don't, this is all an academic discussion.
I agree 100% with everything you just said.
Right.
100% with everything you just said. Let me just finish. And my goal is to see if the board is aligned with looking at this holistically or one parcel at a time. That's all I'm interested in. And if the board isn't aligned with that, then we have something different.
This
What's wrong with the downtown now is it's
board.
one parcel at a time for the last 200 years.
I don't
You tear
think-
down this,
I don't
build
think
that,
that's
move that.
I don't think that's a question. Why
It is
are
a
we
question.
asking that
Yes,
question?
it is a question.
Why
I
are
would
we-
agree it's a question.
It's a question. He has a question about it.
I would question.
Well,
Why would he
okay,
pay?
about it.
Hold on.
Sure.
Do other board members have questions on this? Do you want to do one parcel at a time, or do you want to take and look at the downtown as a cohesive whole?
Well, I have a question, because there was a question
No,
about.
I'm asking you your opinion.
As a believer that the whole is more than the sum of the parts, I vote for
Well, I have
considering
a
it,
question about the
considering
whole
the
Winthrop
whole.
School, because I know somebody asked a question, and I also know that there's a lot of questions in town about the Winthrop School. So then I'm like, do we put that in the thing, or we don't put
It's
it
a
in?
binary, it's a binary question.
Asking.
Binary question.
Binary question. Do you
You
want to
keep-
look at this?
Yes or no?
Yes, as a whole. Yeah, I would
Yes.
want to look at it as a whole, but I
Okay,
think that
thank you.
Winthrop is,
No, stop.
Questionable.
That's not the question. The question is it a whole or is it a segment?
I think it's
So,
one.
no, let me finish the question, damn it. So, the whole,
You asking me?
Jonathan, whole, the whole?
Are you asking me?
Yes,
Yes,
Jonathan.
it's the whole.
Okay.
It's not
Bill.
parcel at a time.
I've always been for the whole,
Emil,
the whole including Patton Park.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I said the whole, except I explained. You don't want to
The
hear my
whole.
explain.
Okay.
Emil had an important
How about Pat?
clarification.
But I want to hear what Pat has to say.
It's not the only question to ask.
Thank you.
Is the whole of parts. That's the one question you're asking is, what line do we draw around the area of scope of the effort? Another
Yes, I think-
beneficial question to ask is, what's the goal of the whole process? What would you like to see as an outcome of the process? There's a lot of, you're looking to spend a lot of money.
I have 6 questions that we could ask and very quickly go around the table and see what we get.
Pretty good.
good.
Should we do it?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm after here. Okay. So, an example here would be to the point of goals. You know, you've got a master plan, but the master plan doesn't really focus on downtown
It's not
in a granular way.
site-specific.
So we could quickly go through 6 questions, and I'll rattle them off, and you see if you want to answer them. If you don't want to answer them, we'll skip.
Go ahead.
And if you want to put the
Go.
plan in front of us, we'll do it. 1, what do you feel is valuable in downtown? What should be preserved? And then flip side of that, what isn't valuable, what would you like to fix? Simple as that. You could take a plan and circle it. And then that could be in the list in the RFP. We think this is valuable, save it. We think this is broken, we think you should look at it. Simple as that. That could be in the RFP. That's 1. 2, what's the weakest, well, that was this 2, is that what's the weakest parts? What's broken? 3, where would you want more density? Where wouldn't you want to change density? Make a circle. You know, where would you, what sorts of areas would you tolerate more density? Where wouldn't you? Few circles, then what you could do is you could put that in the RFP. It's 3 sentences. 4, where are there connections and where aren't there connections downtown? Where would you like to have better connections? You know, try walking from Honeycomb to Willow Street.
Got it.
Can't
Got
get
it.
there, okay?
Don't
That
need-
could be in the RFP.
Right.
We'd like you to look at more connections. I'm going to keep going, okay? Where would parking best be served? We said central. Emil said quarter mile from every corner. That could be in the RFP. We'd like you to look at parking, you know, peripheral parking and central
Good.
parking. And then 6 is within that process, what are the likely uses and where? You know, that would be a market study, and you'd put that in the RFP. And then a very important piece that Emil alluded to is Patton Park, he's included in the proposal. We should talk about that. Emil said those words, nobody else said whether they agreed or not. That's another binary question, Patton Park in, Patton Park out.
So
There it
I
is.
think those are excellent questions, and I would think those would be good questions you would kick off a charrette with.
But they should be in the RFP.
Well, that's
to-
fine.
to
Again,
Patrick's point.
I want to get back to, those are all excellent points. I want to get back to actually getting the money. That's where we need to be focused, okay? So you brought up a good point. Emil put in the park. There were two things that struck me in that presentation. It was a good presentation, less words, the better. But you got it, because remember, we've got an attention span of about 5 to 10 minutes. Is redistricting the business zone. Those are charged political words, so I just say form-based code in the downtown, or something to those effect, because that just opens a can of worms that doesn't need to be opened in that discussion. The other one was the park, because people will look at that, and wait a minute, that's motherhood and apple pie and sacrosanct, and why are you including that in that? Because you're proposing development. You know, and I'm just saying that as, it raises a red flag that I'm not sure is needed to raise.
So are you suggesting Patton Park should not be included in the polygon?
I think not, because we, as Pat pointed out, we've spent, I think it was $150,000 for a master plan for the park that's going to serve, and this answers your question, Pat, why do we do this? It's the basis for asking for future capital expenditures to redo the park based on the recommendations in the park master plan. So I think it's like stirring the pot in a whole different way when it's already in play.
I think the issue with Patton Park is really the intersection of Asbury and Bay Road.
Yeah.
So
wouldn't
the
disagree.
park has to be, it's included not because anybody's going to actually plan for the park.
Right.
They have to plan for the intersection.
That's fine. But
So
that's-
how we could
Yeah.
phrase
It
that.
also locks it into a code that says you will not build on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you incorporate that, somehow that has to be made very clear.
Very
It's
clear.
not.
That can be in the RFP,
it's-
that
no,
it's
no, no,
that's
no, no. I'm
preserved
talking
for,
about if this presentation, it's now in the public realm now.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
So somebody could take this and say, well, look, they want to develop, believe me, this is what's going to happen.
No, that's fine. We should be able to answer those questions.
yeah,
I mean,
and it should be right clear in the RFP.
Right.
It's easy.
I think you'll find that including it, well, you're going to get a lot of comments on connectivity and the ability to get from the park
Yeah.
Yes.
to the other, so it's
And
got to
you
be
can't-
part of the
it's
scope.
gotta be part
Even
of the
though-
scope.
'cause
That's
the
what, that's
Right.
exactly.
disadvantage of the
Why
previous effort was there's $150,000 spent on one thing, like
And
the
here's-
parcel of the thing.
And they're thinking
the
stop at the
whole,
property line. I'm sorry, Mark.
Here's the other thing we have to keep in mind, that we have this other whole 3A business looming out there. So when I read earlier on about mixed use, if that were to be an option, it has to be in relation to amenities. And so I know that everyone in town would like to be able to get walking around town to the park and elsewhere in a way that was not life-threatening or whatever. I mean, to be able, and I know this is.
So that can be put in the RFP.
To improve
Right,
the
and it's also-
sidewalks and whatnot, that is part of the form-based code, to make
Mine's off.
the whole areas work together cohesively.
And it can be
as a whole.
100% clear in the RFP, just reading the words, that nobody's put any buildings, you know.
No. Just forget
You
the
can put that.
RFP. Forget
Okay.
the RFP now.
Okay.
We're not even there yet. We have to get the appropriation to make it happen. So I was thinking as you were making that presentation, Emil, would it be appropriate to have that in reserve for the Monday, the 20th meeting with the Board of Selectmen that I suggested that maybe Marty and Emil, or maybe Jonathan and Emil come and sit in reserve if they start asking questions, what is form-based code and how is it gonna impact, what are we approving? Because that was very informative, or not.
Yeah, it's so complicated, actually.
So,
Works.
if they say, yes, we would like to appropriate money, we think that's appropriate, great. So, we've gotten through that gate. Then the question is the RFP and the scope of services. But that's to be answered after we get the appropriation, right?
I totally disagree. I mean, if you have a board of people that are looking to approve that amount of money without a clear understanding of what it is you're asking for, which would only be defined in a RFP or an outlined scope of work, that is a scary situation.
I agree 100%.
It's like, I don't
Yeah, I have
I
to.
would not want to be in that room
I-
asking for money.
I agree with that.
This is why,
Money later, ideas first.
Yes.
Yeah, was it budget, scope, build, design? A lot of those projects
just-
fail.
I don't disagree with you, Pat, and they might come to that conclusion and say, well, how about doing a scope of services and, but if the budget drives the scope or the scope drives the budget, so it's like, it's,
The goal drives the scope, drives the budget, so that you know you're
I mean,
buying
part of the
what you
part of the problem, why you really do need a hole here, is that downtown Hamilton, you couldn't imagine a situation more poorly planned originally than downtown Hamilton. You're on a state highway.
yep,
You have two intersecting streets within 200 feet, and then right through the middle, you have a railroad, which at-grade intersection, and it's just like, oh my
Diagonal.
God.
And one of the-
Yeah, it's not even at right angles. It's just like, it's like, you know,
And
I mean,
there
there
are,
are times when I think you're just that, you know, throw up your hands, tear down the whole place, you know, start from scratch. It's just, it is really a very difficult task. It's a difficult starting situation.
Right.
and there's
And,
deep-
and there was no, the original town isn't quaint and cute like downtown Topsfield or some other New England town, all right? It was a train depot.
yeah.
And that is its original impetus. Well, there were all the estates and other old houses were off in the countryside, and you had a train depot. It's not a town center. Wenham is a little bit of a town center. Just tiny, but it's a little bit of a town center.
if the town chose to fix that, you could fix it.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, but it's
It is fixable.
so I have a
Okay.
question. So what do you want to do?
I'd like to go through the process that Jonathan
You'd like to what?
described. I would like to go through the process Jonathan described to see
I think
if for nothing else, we can all align on
Yeah,
what the
exactly.
scope of this
Yeah.
effort is.
I'd like to, again, at the close of the meeting, agree on the area as a basic, start.
Right.
And that, and the reason Jonathan's idea is important is I think as Pat said, you can't imagine a board agreeing to spend that kind of money doing something with no idea what.
Yes. No, his
what's the
6,
scope
7
of it?
questions are a good start. We gotta internally,
But I think.
go through this and see if we can get some clarity.
Yeah, I do know, I mean, Jonathan and I put some effort together just to take a look at, because again, you have to demonstrate to me that something can be done and what the potential is before you can really say, yes, that's doable and this is the way we ought to go forward. Even though it might not look anything like that in the end, because it's just a couple of people putting down a couple of ideas. But I think the important part of that is does this
No.
strategy in how you analyze in terms of connectivity and building, does that make sense in the way it was the thought process behind it, to come up with a whole picture on the community. So I guess there's a public comment.
So, in the presentation to the board, select board, what do you think that presentation should encompass?
I'd be curious where the resistance, if any, where the resistance is and what it's about. That would be.
Well,
so
first of all, we have to make a presentation before we can get resistance.
I know,
So-
but
So, I want to know what the board is comfortable. We set the agenda of presenting a request for $150,000 to do a form-based code, whatever we call it, analysis, development, for the Winthrop site, because that's what they're focused on. I think you can expand that to incorporate other areas, maybe the rest of the downtown, in that discussion. Is that what you want?
no, I would not even, I wouldn't bother spending the money for just the Winthrop School site. It's just not.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I would not bother with just doing it on the Winthrop School
No, I
site. no.
know that. I'm asking what you want.
Because they're going to say,
asked
what
to-
can you do with a form-based code on the
I
Winthrop
wanna
School site?
know what the ask is
And it-
of the select board.
Yeah,
I think you postpone your meeting until we all get alignment on what's being asked.
Right.
I don't see the
You know
benefit
what?
of going in front of them
No, wait,
until.
stop, wait. I have, I think I do have concerns that we agree on the RFP. We have a draft of an RFP, but it's 9 o'clock. We don't have time to evaluate it. The other thing that I am concerned about is how this effort dovetails with Section 3A. Because I don't want to go down some path that will end nowhere because the select board decides we are just going to do whatever it takes for 3A and forego this effort. So when you think about it, under 3A, the town has to adopt a zone that provides for multifamily housing. And so for a form-based code, the town would also have to adopt some type of zoning that permits form-based codes. So what? We do it once and go to town meeting once, or we do it twice? And of course, if you do it twice, that has its own set of problems. So I think that if you want to do a form-based code, which I think is about the only way you're ever going to even try and address the issues that Bill just pointed out with a railroad track that runs right smack through the center of town, and try and make what we have a cohesive, walkable area that respects the relationship going forward of the buildings to one another. So we try and fix the setbacks and improve the pedestrian experience on Bay Road and elsewhere. So we have to look at the town and its improvement, which are part of our master plan that's being formulated right now. So you're worried about where we are, but the master plan is looking at economic development and land use and realizing that there's much to be done in the downtown to make it a more attractive place for people to go. And if it were easier for people to go and walk there and park there, they'll be more inclined to shop there instead of, I can't find a place to park and going to North Beverly or whatever. So we have the form-based code, but we also have to think of it in conjunction with Section 3A. There's overlap there. So Patrick sent around some of the work product of the consultant for the 3A. That raised a lot of questions in my mind. The consultant is apparently looking at 2 districts instead of 1. So how does this all fit together? And so we have options, okay? Option 1 is just proceed to the select board with the form-based code. Option 2 might be to try and get clarity as to how 3A and the form-based code can be dovetailed together. If that's something that the planning board thinks is a good idea, then we have some options. We could schedule a meeting, another meeting for November 14th, and work hard at looking at the RFP and talking to Patrick, and John Witten, I believe, is going to be on board with respect to the 3A, and he's very knowledgeable about form-based codes, and try and get clarity from him. So adding another meeting is an option, or we could address all these issues on November 21st and perhaps move the meeting with the select board until we have a little more clarity about what is feasible in the big scheme of things. And tell me I'm wrong, but you do have two different codes being considered for not the identical areas, but the form-based code would be a subset of 3A, potentially. So that's the bigger picture in my mind, and I don't want anybody going down rabbit holes and then finding that there's this other constraint out there that will cause us to think that we may have wasted our time. So what is people's pleasure here? I mean, an extra meeting on the 14th, where we look at the RFP that we now have in hand. We can get Patrick to give us, an explanation of what this consultant has come up with, and respond to that, because I did notice in one part of it, in this business district, that the height restriction was going out the window from 35 feet to 45 feet. So that's a real consideration. And it impacts the form-based code.
I'd propose option 3, which is to
what?
utilize the November 21st meeting and further discuss the options that we have in outlining the RFP and the consideration for whether or not the 3A is part of that scope of effort, and outlined as one of the concerns. It's kind of captured in one of the numbers that Jonathan had presented too. It could be something that gets addressed as part of it, or it could be separate. But I think we used the meeting on the 21st to discuss that
Jonathan,
further.
what do you think?
I would agree. And in addition, what I would say is that one of the ways that 3A and a holistic approach to the form-based code downtown dovetail is that I firmly believe, I'll even go so far as to say, I know that when you consider it as a whole, you will get more square footage, i.e. more dollars out of the process, as well as better connectivity and more usable open space and a better design.
Multifamily housing.
Yes. So if you proceed looking at this in pieces, you will leave dollars on the table. That's my feeling.
Got it.
So if you, when I say dollars, what I mean is meaningful density that goes to satisfying 3A.
So would you,
As well as the dog wagging the tail, not the tail wagging the dog, Patrick, as well as it being in the service of the town's best interests.
right, so are
you
you
get a
in
twofer.
favor of another meeting of you said the 21st?
Yes.
The 21st?
Whenever you pick.
Bill?
I'm not in favor of an extra meeting. It's just a very busy time of year.
Right. So the 21st?
But anything else, yeah.
Amos?
I think it's actually good for the board to have a little bit of a free-form discussion on this.
I think that's what we've had.
Like, and by sequitur, more of what we had.
Right. I think we need to understand
Right.
3A and what is being contemplated here, because I confess I have been asking Patrick for more information about what this consultant has been doing, and it just occurs to me that we do not want to work at cross purposes.
Right.
And I think that, if we were to drink some Kool-Aid, I mean, we could think that perhaps we could get this form-based code done in time to have the 3A and the form-based code sync together and get it adopted by the end of next year. That would be a real stretch. It may not be feasible at all, but it could be something that we could
Are you-
maybe work for.
Are you thinking that that would happen under the umbrella of a form-based code process?
Yeah. that's
Okay.
the way to do it.
So another selling point to,
It would have to, that's the only way it could happen.
That would have to
Well,
be part of the RFP.
I have to figure out what my presentation is, because it's happening whether
Yeah.
the board knows what it's doing or not.
Yeah.
So the other question is, the town manager asked, is $150,000 enough? So he said, because I don't want to go down this road and then have you come back and say, I need another $50,000 or $100,000 to incorporate the entire downtown. So I just want to,
Yeah.
so, because we don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish here.
Well, we could actually find out and call somebody,
Who would that,
and that would,
who would do that homework?
Well, if you just look at what was done for $150,000 last year, and it only encompassed Patton Park, it'd probably be, and again, it's a bit irresponsible to ask for a dollar value without understanding and having alignment on the scope of what we're doing.
I agree, so maybe a certain individual that developed the scope can share it with certain individuals that might give him some feedback.
I would think that.
Because I would need that information.
yeah, I know you do, yeah.
Well, you know, the point that I think needs to be stressed here is that these two initiatives can't be viewed in two different silos. They have to merge somehow.
I agree, that's why we have started having this conversation is, you
So
know,
in my mind, if the budget should definitely be increased to the extent feasible, because this 3A consultant has already been paid money. And I'm not sure
what's the goal of the 3A consultant?
to come up with the district of reasonable size with the requisite 731
I think the
provided for.
ultimate goal is to provide more affordable multifamily housing
No,
that
I
is
know that.
connected by transit to the rest of the region.
No, wait,
Yeah.
we know that.
No, it's complying with the mandates from this
So
executive
it's basically to
office of-
say, okay, this is your area,
Right, exactly,
okay.
exactly. But, you know, the thing of it is, as Bill Witten said, it's,
John Witten.
I
or
know.
Bill Wheaton, which
Yeah.
one is it?
John Witten, excuse me, said it's basically a roadshow. I mean, we have
Oh,
to.
yeah.
It's the district, it's not like it will get developed, but I think that if you did have a form-based code that showed where and how it could be developed, it would go a long way.
I agree, and that's the whole point, to get to Pat's question, why are you doing this,
We
is.
have to do it.
We'd
well,
have to do it on the day,
We
we
have to.
get to choose when we do it.
Well, we don't have to do the 730,
No,
because that's
No,
not the
no, no,
law.
We're
no, that's
never
not
gonna
the
do
law.
730,
But you have to
because the-
Because
provide.
that's 25% increase in our
No, it's not
housing.
gonna happen.
It's
but-
not gonna happen.
It's not
saying whether
gonna
or not
happen,
we'll-
but that's not the point.
Yeah.
You have to provide a district that, in some unreal world, some alternate universe, it could happen.
I just don't know why we wouldn't push the agenda and discussion with the select board until we have alignment on the scope of the proposal.
I'm sorry?
Why are we
He's
trying
talking
to
to
rush
them.
to a meeting? Yeah,
He's talking to them with the HDC, though. He's not going before them as the planning board.
No.
understood.
Okay.
Yeah, but why would the HDC, without the alignment with the planning board and goals and objectives of the effort, want to go ask for money without knowing what we're
The
asking for?
HDC isn't going after money. The HDC is there's a vacuum, a leadership vacuum in town.
Yeah,
If the HDC hadn't brought this to the selectmen and advocated, I've been advocating for about 6 months now, 9 months, that this is a good thing to do, before the board and before other people, it wouldn't happen.
I guess I'm wondering, I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, I'm just saying, why would we propose having it done before we outline the scope of what we're asking?
Because it needs to get into the budget cycle. The budgets are being formulated now. So it needs to get in and be budgeted for. So if it doesn't get budgeted now, it could be a year before it gets budgeted. It would be the next fiscal cycle in 2025. So it needs to be budgeted for in 2024.
When's the budget get developed?
I can't hear you.
What date does the budget get developed? What date does the budget get developed?
What state?
Date.
Date?
He's looking for the timeline.
I don't have the final date that it's in process. So the idea is to get into the discussion,
Yep.
and you get preliminary agreement from the people that make the decision on what it goes into the budget and will be proposed, that they go, yes, that's a good idea. Let's put a placeholder in the budget for that, details to follow. It's like any business plan that any business does. In your company, if you need like some new physical plant item, you would go to somebody and say, hey, guys, we've got a failing boiler or HVAC system. It needs to get in the budget for next year. I haven't got a scope, I haven't bid it out, but I know it's a $500,000 project. It needs to go into the budget discussions.
I don't know if you've been in any
Okay,
of those
let-
meetings
let's-
before.
If the select board has this on its agenda for the 20th,
Yeah.
and it's not likely that that will be continued, then I think the object is to inform the select board, and Emil, I think it would be a good idea if you went, and I would be happy to go, that what the planning board wants to do
Right.
is marry these two issues.
I think that's
And-
fine.
And in trying to marry these two issues, that we should not be penny wise and pound foolish, because
Right.
there's such an incredible impact on the town from this 3A mandate, that the only way to preserve the character of the town is to look at the town, the town center,
I
not, we're
think
not
that
talking
I think
about
that-
the, Union Street or anywhere else, but look at the town center.
It marries very well.
Consistent with the master plan, to try and make this community work better for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. So I think that's a great, confluence of interest, because you've got it right. The politics are, you only want to do this once.
Right, we can't,
So-
once,
Right,
it's a
so-
one-shot deal, and there's a deadline.
So Emil, if you could do some background before the 20th, and
Yeah, I'll see.
inform, and
Yeah, I
help
will. Yeah.
inform that discussion?
Yeah.
Because I think that actually would strengthen the argument, is, because you're right, we're shooting in the dark right now. We're picking a number out of the blue. And if we can come back and say, well, we've done a draft scope, it's just a scope to outline the framework of what might happen in the largest sense potential, so that we know what the biggest,
Right, I think the existing scope of work has to be expanded to address 3A.
no, I'm not disagreeing there.
Right,
I'm not-
so, but because of that, I think that increases the cost.
Probably, and that's why I'm asking, so I think that's a great time to bring that concept to the select board and say, board has been thinking about this in more detail, not just the Winthrop site, but because it all interacts, and it should
Of
be.
course it does, it has to.
No, I get it. Well,
It has to.
I'm trying to form my thoughts, so when I'm having this
Yes.
discussion, and it dovetails with 3A.
Right, it absolutely does. Does anyone else have anything to add to this?
Nope, I make the motion, we adjourn.
There's some public comment, if you just want me to run through them quick.
Yes, but before that, I think if there's no objection, Emil and I will go to the select board meeting and attempt to state what the planning board agrees to, and
If there's 3 of you there, is that a problem? Does Rick wear the hat of the planning board during those meetings?
are you
or-
wearing the HDC hat?
Yes.
Then you wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of the planning board.
No, I wouldn't.
so-
I'm,
Yeah.
but our message better be,
We're-
of-
Well,
work
and
in
that's the other
tandem.
thing, we need to work in tandem. I think
Yeah,
if the
yeah.
HDC and the planning board, are
I think-
aligned,
I think we are.
I think so too. And I think,
So I think by the fact that he's there are 3 members of the planning board at a meeting.
yeah,
Right.
Well,
I'm-
but you
I'm
have
not a
to-
planning board member in that meeting.
Yeah, he has to announce that
Wear
he's.
your other hat then.
He's
Yes.
wearing his other hat,
That's why I'm there.
right.
I know, but I don't know, as long as it's not a problem.
Well, he has to disclose it, and I don't know, we'll have to check with town council about your ability to vote on planning board.
There's no vote.
There's no conflict.
There's no
There's
vote.
nothing before us to vote, so it
Right.
doesn't matter.
We're not making any policy decisions.
Right. Okay, so, board business.
Oh, didn't you want to take public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is my public comment.
These are anonymous, it looks like all of them. Agree with Patrick, there's no rezoning should occur until these studies are completed to show that there is a vibrant market for the commercial. For commercial in Hamilton, the town can't keep stores as it is now. Another one is, isn't the school building committee still deciding on options, some of which may keep Winthrop open? Question mark. I think that's true. Can someone explain the reason for spending millions of dollars in consultants to redesign the downtown that's already beautiful? What's the need for it after watching hours of conversations with planning board? The whole point of the project is sadly still unclear. Hamilton has an incredible value. Homes are sold within days. Why change that into a cookie cutter form? Why not just spend money to maintain the town the way it is? Maybe most people don't want a vibrant downtown. Francie, I think the town should wait to spend any more money until the Cutler project is further ahead. Otherwise, this could be a lot of money down the drain and looks like the town is really disorganized in wasting tax money. Enough paying expensive consultants to tell us what our downtown should look like. They don't even live here or pay taxes here. Can you ask the people? They will tell you that they don't want anything of what you are trying to accomplish. Enough with the form-based code. Budget is on the fiscal cycle. What's the rush? Budget is on next fiscal cycle. What's the rush?
Are these all anonymous?
Some of
Except for
them are.
Francie. Yep. That's all the comment.
The simple answer to all those questions is if you don't plan for the future, the future is going to plan for you.
Right, and section
Yeah, it's
3A
true.
is not an option.
I think we have a comment in the,
Oh, please, go to them.
I'll be quick. I have a question, actually, a question and a comment. Nancy Dashkin, 215 Woodbury Street. The train station is Hamilton Wenham, correct?
Right, so we're
So-
required to zone for 731
And so
dwelling units.
is Wenham also?
They're at
like,
300 and
60,
something.
I
So
think.
I just wondered whether there was a possibility, given that circle of, dare I say, working together. I don't know. It's just a question. But when I looked at that circle, the other thing that I thought of, which I also thought of when we were narrowly focusing on the Winthrop School, was, again, there's a lot of residential area in that circle. And I think it's really important to consider the abutters, those residential areas that could be significantly affected by a whole new plan, and the way it's presented, so that those people that have lived in those homes or live in those homes now don't feel as though they're being overlooked or railroaded.
Is this with respect to the section 3A?
Well, when you look at the whole Section 3A, yes, but also the area around the Winthrop School. There's some residential streets, carriage lane, and then there's some houses next to, and being in a butter to another property and having lived now 2 years with lots of different stories, I just think it's really important to recognize that there's mixed zoning down there now, and I just think that's an important consideration. I think the form-based is a wonderful way to go, but those people are there, and
That's what
Wenham has-
a form-based code does. It's intensively public participation determining what people want. Because if we try and rezone that without public participation,
It won't
everybody's
pass.
going to go bonkers.
I know, and I'm still part of the other one.
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
Bonkers is
Right.
pretty close to where we are.
Wenham is required to zone for 365, so that's
1,000.
1,096. dwelling units. If they won't get built because we don't have the infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
If it were to be built,
Yeah.
there would be.
game.
Well, there would be gridlock.
Well, never mind the
Right,
gridlock.
in Asbury
Think
Street,
about
every
groundwater.
single-
Think about all that stuff. So I'm not going down those roads, but I just wanted, it was my question, because where that circle is, and also, that whole thing about where the abutters are is just
Oh, yeah.
something.
I'm not sure that the administration is too concerned with the butters in this 3A legislation.
probably not.
I don't think that was part of the consideration. So Patrick said around minutes. Did everyone have an opportunity to look at those minutes? We're not approving the minutes today, but what I was hoping is that I could get some volunteers to take a look at these minutes so that I wasn't the only one who had to review them. So we have minutes for July 25th. They're one page. If you raise your hand now, you can get one-page minutes.
I can help look at that.
Matt, you get the one page.
Perfect.
That's July 25th. Okay, the next one is pretty short. October 17th, 2023.
October 7th. The one that's here says, in our packet is January 17th.
We don't have that.
We don't have that. Might have it in,
Oh, you don't have them?
No,
Well,
not in the
We
handout.
just have the
January
July
17th.
25th and the January 17th.
Well, he transmitted them by email. So anyhow, I just urge everyone to please read the minutes and try. I might have gone through these, and these might actually just be on the agenda for next time, because I noticed, Jonathan, your name is spelled correctly. Mm-hmm. Yes, so that might be that these have been reviewed. So, any other board business? Do you want to renew your motion?
make a motion that we adjourn?
Do I have a second? Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Porter, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Weeden, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.